Our concept of profit has got to change. It can't always be measured in dollars and cents. It's got to be measured in, our return on our investment's got to be in, you got to look at the health of people. You got to look at, the number of employees you employ. What are you doing within your communities and the families within your communities? And if you can give yourself some credit for that, then maybe you don't need to measure everything in dollars and cents, because if you're measuring everything in dollars and cents, there's not necessarily a lot of room for much else, people or the environment.
That's Ken Elliott. He's the CEO and president of IND Hemp in Fort Benton, Montana. This is the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. My name is Eric Herlock. And so if you've listened to the show at all in the past year, you know that I've gotten to know the folks at IND Hemp pretty well. They've been our main sponsor this year, and I think that they are doing just amazing things out there. I think they've got the right idea when it comes to fiber and grain and climate change mitigation. And so today, this is a really just long and winding conversation with Ken about everything, about how he started the business, how he got his start in environmental work. You heard in the intro his thoughts about, return on investment and profit. This is just a wide-ranging interview. We go all over the place: environmental topics, carbon sequestration, politics, a little bit of religion. It's got it all. So I'm going to skip over the normal hemp news nuggets and all that stuff and just get into the interview with Ken. Hope you enjoy it. And yeah, I'll catch up with you after the interview. Ken Elliott from IND Hemp. Welcome to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. How are you doing?
Eric, I'm doing great. We're out in Montana. The weather's holding. Winter hasn't showed up yet, so it's pretty good. Life's good here.
Good. So you and I have spoken many times on the phone out in Fort Benton, and I guess you've been on our podcast a little bit. Just we did a sponsor message early on in sort of our sponsorship relationship, because full disclosure, IND Hemp is one of our main sponsors for the podcast. So thank you for your support. I do appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. We're big fans of what you guys are doing, and we've got ties to your part of the country, and we really appreciate you being an advocate and bringing hemp into the mainstream, or at least as much of the mainstream as we can get into.
Yeah, we got to get bigger, right? We got to get everybody on the hemp train.
Absolutely, brother.
Yeah, so first I thought I'd ask you about the processing facility that you're building there in Fort Benton. When I was out there in July, it seemed like all of the big pieces were in place, but you still had to run the air ducts, and then it was going to get commissioned. Can you bring us up to speed on that? How is the fiber facility going?
Yeah, things are going good. We got some things that are happening that we had no idea would be an issue. We've got ships that are sitting, waiting to be unloaded in the ports on the West Coast, and we're hopeful that some of the equipment we need is sitting in them boats. And so we're missing the big equipment's there, the ductwork's there. We've had technicians come in and start fine-tuning their equipment. We had a little bit of an issue bringing in the La Roche technician from France, because the U.S. wasn't allowing people to come and go. And so the engineer from La Roche needed to come in, and he wasn't able to get here until last week.
Okay, but he's there now.
He's out there. He was there last week, and he's here this week. And he's doing the best he can, but it's like, Ken, we need a couple pieces of equipment. And they're not even big pieces of equipment. It's how we communicate, the PLCs and all the equipment. How does the equipment talk to each other, communicate? Okay. And there are literally hundreds of pieces of equipment that need to communicate with each other, and we don't have that. And so we're waiting for some of that key equipment to come in.
You can't just run down to Radio Shack and get it.
Just can't run down to Radio Shack, exactly. So anyway, it's coming. It's kind of a bit of a frustration, but it is where we are.
Yeah.
So we got plenty to keep us busy.
And so tell me the capacity of this thing. Once it's fully operational, how much you're going to be able to run through there?
It's a 5-ton per hour unit. And what that actually means, it's not clear, but somewhere around 5 ton an hour.
Okay.
And once we start up, we'll start up with, one shift, trying to figure it out, get it fine tuned. And that'll probably be 2 or 3 or 4 months. We got our oilseed processing facility up last year, and it took months to get it tweaked, and we're still tweaking it. So I envision we'll probably take some time to get this thing tweaked. But once it's up and running and we're 24/7, we'll have 2 or 3 shifts depending on what we're doing. But we envision like 100 round bales a day.
Wow.
So
Okay.
and that's probably a couple years from now.
Yeah. And that'll be really good for the town of Fort Benton, right? Like I imagine there's some people there who might need jobs.
Absolutely. We've got 35 people on the payroll right now. And most of them are in the Montana area, a lot of them right there in Fort Benton. We've got folks who have got college degrees. I mean, you've met some of our folks. They're, PhD engineers. We've got a master's degree. Our agronomist has got a master's degree, and we've got chemical engineers. We've got somebody out there who's an aerospace engineer putting our LaRoche line together. So we got some real smart people, well-educated, who know how to do that sort of thing. But then we've also got ranch kids and farm kids who can pick up a torch and cut some steel and do some welding and move some stuff. And we got a great mix of white collar and blue collar. We just got good folks, and everybody that's working with us kind of got a passion for the same thing we do. And I think we'll get more of that. We've got people reaching out to us from locally, and then there's folks all over the country that like to do something like we're doing in their parts of the country. And so we're talking about that. And in fact, we've got folks, we're working with somebody in Mexico, and we're bringing an engineer over from Ghana with the idea of come in and learn what we're doing here in the U.S. And then we'll help you guys get going in Ghana, because it's, we're big fans of fiber, but we're also big fans of the grain, and it feeds people. And Africa is one of those places we could use some better food alternatives.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, hemp has so much to offer, not just like environmental benefits, but bringing economies back to small towns and, like you said, feeding people all over the world. There's just like so many aspects to this crop. So these are the exciting days when we're putting it all together.
Yeah, and I think we may have talked a little bit. We're involved with this X Prize carbon removal challenge that Elon Musk is doing, and I know there's a bunch of teams out there. A lot of folks are doing some things, and we kind of look at this as a platform to get the hemp industry to work together. Working with people like the Well Done Foundation. They're plugging wells using the hemp, and we're talking with the Hudson Carbon people. Ben Dotson, very smart on the carbon end of things, and talking with Pan Exchange. A lot of people around the country trying to figure out how we can use hemp to remove some of the carbon in the environment. How do we sequester it? How do we build materials? People like, Maddie at Hempitecture, how do we help them, and how do we help the hempwood folks? There is a ton of folks who have got some great ideas on how we can incorporate hemp into their products and then make it mainstream. So, and that's what we're using this X Prize carbon removal challenge to bring the hemp people together and try to figure it out. And Bruce Deason is doing something very similar. And so the hemp industry is well represented.
Yeah. Well, tell me how you first got into hemp in the first place. Because you're not like a typical hempster. You're not coming at this from like a marijuana legalization point of view. You came at this from a whole other place, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a 30-year career in environmental, and I like to tell people I'm not necessarily a tree-hugging dirt worshiper, but I believe in taking care of our environment. And I worked with industry, and we'd identify contaminated properties around the country, outside the country, and we'd go in there and assess what it would take to clean up. We would clean it up, and then we'd reposition, sell the property, and move to the next project. I had some great projects. And then I got involved. I had a friend of mine who had a oil and gas company and wanted to get involved with the Bakken oil fields. And the Bakken oil field is a huge oil I guess the reserves up in that part of the country are just tremendous. And so he wanted to get involved, wanted me to help him find a brownfield site. We identified a historic oil refinery near Wolf Point, Montana. It's in northeastern Montana on the Fort Peck Indian Reservation. And we got together collectively with several groups who wanted to reposition that property, clean it up because it's still a mess, and then build a clean energy oil refinery using the Bakken crude, which is right at hand. Made a lot of sense. Met with the governor of Montana, met with the EPA, the tribes. Everybody thought it would be a great idea, and we purchased that site in 2011.
Oh, okay.
Wow. And we did a lot of work, and we just weren't able to make it happen. But since I own the site, I've got to do something to clean it up, and it's significantly contaminated. It shut down in 1984, was operated by some well-known oil companies that left the reservation in a mess, and we're reaching out to them to get them to come back. But we looked at how can we clean that place up, and I've used phytoremediation at other sites that I've been involved with. Mm-hmm. And so we tried to figure out what would be a good phytoremediation alternative for this site. And we looked at a lot of different ideas, and in the 2012, 13, 14 timeframe, we settled on industrial hemp. And of course, this is before you could raise hemp in the country. Right. So we were looking at how can we get this thing approved to help clean up the site. And in this process, the laws changed. And it was like, well, look at that. Yeah. Now it's 2014. The state of Montana is issuing licenses to grow hemp. I don't think it was 2014, 2015, 16, something like that. We actually got the first license in the state of Montana.
For a research permit.
And, yeah, we were doing research. We wanted to find out, qualitatively, will hemp work here, right? Mm-hmm. And then if it works qualitatively, it works. And let's find out quantitatively how well it works. And so we've kind of been on that journey. And in this time frame, we had some terrible droughts. We didn't know what the heck we were doing the first couple of years we planted seed. It was a disaster. But we just kept doing it, and then we got some other farmers in the area that were interested in raising hemp because up in our country, it's wheat and barley, and nobody's making any money on that. Our farmers are struggling, so we looked at it as what's the chances of creating a new rotational crop up there that might be able to help. And
sure.
Then we recognize, we can raise it, but we don't have a processing facility. It doesn't do a lot of good. So then we built a processing facility for the grain. We got neck deep in the grain end of things and realized we needed to do something with the fiber. And so last year we built our fiber facility, and we're trying to get that up and running in 2022.
Right. That's amazing. So getting back to climate change. So we as humans have known about climate change for decades now, right? Mm-hmm. It's like certain industries and maybe some political parties have been either denying it or actively, trying to change the conversation about it. And it's just so frustrating that it's become this like political issue, right? And I know that you're sort of on the conservative side of things. How do you talk to other folks? Sort of I don't even know how to say this, but how do you talk to people about climate change without them reacting negatively, or how do you get through that sort of like political soup? I don't even know what else to call it.
Yeah, and it's a huge problem in our country. We've got folks on both sides of the political aisle, good people on both sides of that, right? Mm-hmm. And we've weaponized our politics. The media has pitted us against each other. And so the folks I talk to, there's no confusion in their minds as to can a liberal or conservative. We're conservative. We're a Christian-based, family-run business, and we're on a reservation. We see what socialism does, for example, when there's no jobs for people and that sort of thing. And so from our standpoint, it's like, hey, we explain to them what the issue is. And what we find out is that because our country is so politicized, if a Democrat comes out, let's just use Al Gore for an example. Al Gore comes forward and talks about climate change, because of the way things are right now, anything he says is going to be discredited.
Yeah.
And that's not right. We lost the message because we have no respect for the messenger. That's just not right. There's, like I said, there's good people on both sides of the political aisle that are good people.
Right.
And, Al's got children and grandchildren, and I've got kids and grandkids, and it's like, I think our motivations are the same. So when I speak to my friends, the people in the industry, people who might be more conservative, business oriented, business minded, I talk to them about the science, and it's like, guys, this is not, and I'm a geologist. I've got a master's degree in geology, and people talk to me about, well, climate's been changing for eons and so forth. Glaciers 10,000 years ago. It's just part of the,
but
right.
It's changed very quickly, and it's sort of like tracks with the Industrial Revolution. You can see how much carbon we've just been putting in the atmosphere, and yeah, it's very frustrating.
Yeah, and that's my argument. And I talk to these guys and explain to them, I'm a conservative guy. I believe in science. I've read the science. Well, how much science have you read? And then, of course, they'll try to say that they've read it and they don't believe it. And it's like, first of all, you didn't read it, because if you had read it, then there wouldn't be this, this dichotomy of how you interpret it and how I interpret it.
Yeah.
And I think it goes back to, you heard the messenger and you discredited everything he said. And so we just got to get over that. And for the last 20 years, let's say 20 years, Al Gore's been making this pitch. It's like
20 wasted years, really. Like we could have been way ahead of where we are now if, like you said, we had listened to, or there had been a different messenger or something.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's hard to point fingers at people, but I kind of blame the media. I don't care if you're a Fox News guy or an MSNBC kind of person. It's like they are pitting each other against us, and they'll get people on the television to dispute whatever Al's talking about or whatever some conservatives talking about.
Just for ratings, so they can make money.
Yeah.
Right? Just so they can sell ads.
For money.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And therein lies the crux of our problem, I think, in this country. This is a country that is established on capitalism and free enterprise and individuals going out there and doing the best they can to create something that's better and cheaper, and that's what we founded this country on, and we did so good for so long. And then and I think kind of the tipping point you remember the old show Wall Street, in 1987, and Michael Douglas is playing this Gordon Gekko, and he talks about greed is good, right? Greed is good. And that's where we're at right now. It's greed. It's not about making enough money to put your kids through school or having a second car or even having a second home. It's about having enough, more than enough. And somehow this is zero net sum game we're all in. And if I'm going to get more, as a consequence, you're going to get less. But I'm okay with that. It's like, and when you look around inner cities, and we do a lot of work on Native American reservations, and you look around and see what's that created in this country, and it's not good.
Well, and if we expect people to care about the environment, it's like most Americans at this point, I think, are financially strapped, right? Like they're more concerned about feeding their families and paying the rent than they are about these like slightly more abstract concepts of, mitigating climate change. So this whole system of capitalism and, based on greed, it's made this problem much worse because the people that we need to act are so distracted by, just the act of trying to survive.
And, I think there's something to that, but I also know that we've never, ever had as much money in our culture and our society as we have right now. It used to be measured in somebody who was successful and was wealthy had $1 million or some number like that. And now it's measured in tens of millions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars or billions of dollars.
Yeah.
And so it's like, there's a tipping, something happened where we have got way too much money in the hands of too few people who are focused on things that they want to do, And what they want to do doesn't necessarily include everybody else. They've lost track of where our culture and our society is, their responsibility to our society. And, this same society that gave them the opportunity to be who they are, they've turned their back on it. And then we're all surprised about the number of people who end up in prisons, the number of kids who are on drugs, the hopelessness out there. I mean, you can see hopelessness in a lot of this country.
Yeah.
And that has to change, because if we don't care about, the folks who live in our community, do we really care about the environment? Because if it's easy enough to turn your back on people, it's easy enough to turn your back on the environment. If money is all you're concerned with, if greed is it, there's no room for the environment either. So we need to change that, because I think the people who have money, they got kids and grandkids, and so we need to, I think some people think
do they feel like they are sort of protected by this money? Like, oh, no matter what happens, at least, we'll survive because we've got the resources to survive.
I think so.
I mean, I don't know if there's like a callousness involved there, or like how that fits into their equation. I don't know.
I don't know either. And we have to figure that out, because they need to be part of the solution. The oil companies need to be part of the solutions, right? Mm-hmm. We can't throw coal miners out of the equation, because they've got a stake in this. You throw them out on the streets, and it's like, well, I got to feed my kids too.
Yeah.
So it's a very complex issue we got to deal with, and the people we need to get engaged with this are the very smartest people out there. And in many cases, those are the guys that are creating these huge corporations and running them, and they are very, very smart. And we need to get them back into let's fix the environment things. Let's figure out how we can help our neighbor and change things. Our concept of profit has got to change. It can't always be measured in dollars and cents. It's got to be measured in, our return on our investment's got to be in, you got to look at the health of people. You got to look at, the number of employees you employ. What are you doing within your communities and the families within your communities? And if you can give yourself some credit for that, then maybe you don't need to measure everything in dollars and cents. Because if you're measuring everything in dollars and cents, there's not necessarily a lot of room for much else.
Right.
People or the environment.
Yeah. I mean, greed, or they say that money is the root of all evil, but it's actually, I think the original quote is that the love of money is the root of all evil. So that's, yeah.
Yeah.
And then you've got the billionaires who are racing to space, right? Yeah, it's just like, come on, guys, maybe just focus on this planet. It's very frustrating.
Back to those billionaires going to space, trying to figure out how they can live an environment on Mars, which is a very harsh environment. So it's like, dudes, before our environment gets that harsh, let's figure out how we can do some things. Right. And those are the smart guys. Those are the guys that have to jump in with both feet and focus with us. It has to happen.
Yeah. So there's this quote about climate change that I like. It's by a guy named John Holden. He was an energy expert and climate advisor, I guess, during the Obama administration. And he says that basically we have three options when it comes to climate change: mitigation, adaptation, and suffering. And he says that we're going to do some of each, but the question is what the mix is going to be. The more mitigation we do, the less adaptation will be required, and the less suffering there will be. So I see hemp fitting into that mitigation bucket, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
How do we get it to scale? So I have this, like, maybe it's sort of a science fiction type vision of what just the United States could be. You've got that great big swath of beautiful farmland in the middle, the Midwest, and picture that, and you really have to stretch your imagination here, but picture that just huge amounts of, big, tall hemp, almost like we could create the lungs of the world there. You know how they say that the Amazon forest is the lungs of the world? We could possibly do another one of those, right? But with hemp, I don't know how we would do that, but people might say that's impractical, but I think it's just a lack of imagination if you can't see that with me. And then there's also the whole thing about the topsoil in the Midwest is like they say it's like a third gone already just from not the best farming practices in the world. So I wonder how we can have that intersection of large-scale hemp production with regenerative ag, and what effect that would do for mitigation. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure you've heard of Gabe Brown and his regenerative farming practices. Gabe's in North Dakota, and love listening to that guy. And then another name I use a lot is Zach Bush. He talks about what's happening with glyphosate, right, and things like that. And here's something interesting too. We had somebody from China come visit us and take a look at our facilities over here, and I asked him. I said, "Hey, what do the folks over in Asia? What do they think of us Americans? Talk about our climate and our environment. I mean, is that something that resonates with you guys?" Yeah. And he said to me, he says, "Ken, you guys have been raising crops over here for, pick a number, 150 years, right? And you guys are starting to understand that your soils go away, the chemistry of your groundwater and your surface water is bad, and the amount of chemicals you put on your crops is terrible, your soils are terrible." He goes, "That's after 150 years. He goes, "In China, we've been doing it for 6,000 years. Wow. Our soils are ruined. If we can't pour chemicals on our lands, we don't get any crops." And what you see is China out there looking at Brazil as an opportunity to raise some crops to feed some cattle in order to feed their people. The Chinese are in the U.S. actively looking at establishing companies to bring chickpeas and things like that over to China. They're in Africa trying to figure out how they can develop farmlands to feed their people because they've devastated their lands. And, I've never been to China, to be honest with you. And so it's like, that's an interesting perspective. And so we see it right here in our country. And what we really like about hemp is hemp is one of those crops, and we've seen it. We've raised it for several years now. We see how good it is for our soil. It brings soil tilth back. It doesn't use as much water. And the idea that hemp doesn't need water, doesn't need fertilizers, is a misconception. It's a green plant. It likes water. It likes fertilizer. But you can find that balance. You don't have to necessarily pump the chemicals into a hemp field to get it to work.
Right.
And we're a non-GMO, so you can't use glyphosate on hemp, right? And so once people start understanding what glyphosate is doing to, Roundup is doing to the health of our country, and start getting an appreciation of what Gabe Brown is talking about with regenerative farming, I think hemp has got an opportunity to be one of those rotational crops. Mix this in with wheat and barley, with corn and soybeans, and then I think you will. I think hemp is such a good crop. It's a great opportunity to develop a plant-based protein that's very good for you.
Yeah.
And I'm a big beef guy, right? We're
right.
a beef country, and I love beef. But when you look at the science, and it's like, man, that is not sustainable. You can't be cutting rainforests down in Brazil to plant soybeans to feed a cow, right? That is not sustainable. And we've talked to our farmers our ranchers up in Montana, and said, what's going on in Brazil is negatively impacting what you guys are wanting to do with raising cattle in Montana. Somehow you got to distance yourself from that. There's plenty of beef in Montana to raise and to eat. We don't need to cut any more rainforest down. So there's a huge opportunity and dialogue for getting more and more people engaged with this. That's why it's more than just hemp. It's a huge issue, and we need to include the folks that are concerned with our environment. We need to include the folks who are in the ranching and farming business. We got to include people who are caring for children who've got autism or ADHD or whatever, that maybe glyphosate had that issue or created that issue. It's a huge, complex problem, and we just need the smartest people out there working on it.
Right. Yeah. Glyphosate it's conflictual for me because, you hear people talk about regenerative ag and no-till farming, which is great, but then, they have their no-till crops and they do the burn down before they plant the next crop, which means they spray it with glyphosate. And it's like, well,
Yeah.
how can you be considered regenerative ag if you're using this poison that is then killing the microbiomes in your soil? It just seems so, I don't know, conflictual.
Yeah.
So how do you
And
how do you get past that?
these farmers, and we deal with farmers all over the country. That's their problem. It says, Ken, we know we shouldn't be using that stuff, right? It can't be good for it.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, you can't spray glyphosate on pigweed, for example, and kill it. It's resistant. So
Sure.
some of these weeds are glyphosate resistant, right? And of course, you got the big, Monsanto's or Bayer trying to figure out what the next chemical is we can dump on those weeds to kill them, right?
Yeah.
So, and our farmers are right. It's like, man, Ken, I cannot make my farm payment unless I can keep the weed pressure down, so I can raise more crop. My yields got to be whatever they are.
Yeah, they're
And
trapped
so
in a
it's
cycle. They're trapped in that cycle.
yeah,
Like how do you
yeah,
break it?
absolutely. And one of the things we look forward to is this discussion on carbon credits.
Mm-hmm.
If we can somehow show that the farmers are, through photosynthesis, their plants are removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and that's what we all want. We all agree collectively in our society, our culture, that that's a good thing. Well, if everybody thinks that's a good thing, how about pay that farmer some money so that he can do more of it more efficiently? And oh, by the way, you can't use glyphosate. Okay, at this point, if I got somebody funding me through a carbon credit means, maybe I don't need to put the glyphosate down. Maybe I don't need to get the yields that I needed in the past if I'm supplementing my cash crop with a carbon credit. So I'm
Sure.
putting more money in your pocket, and it's coming from somebody in Chicago who's concerned about carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, who's worried about global warming, right? If you're really worried, put your money where your heart is. Let's create this carbon capture opportunity. Let's provide some way that you can put some money in that farmer's pocket, and let's do this collectively, as opposed to just putting the burden on removing CO2 on the backs of our farmers who've got enough burden to deal with on a day-to-day basis.
Oh, I absolutely agree. They need to be paid for that because we're not going to get out of the climate change mess without agriculture. We just can't do it. They have to be a major player in this. So we have to take care of them. And I would like to see more people involved in agriculture. It's like now they say it's like less than 2% of the population in the United States is connected to agriculture. And when, 100, 200 years ago, everybody was involved in agriculture. So, yeah, and I think I like to say that hemp is, a gateway crop. It's brought in new people into agriculture. But yeah, we've got a lot of research to do, and we need more people working on it.
Yeah, and it's we really reach out. We're trying to find those millennial types who are tired of playing video games, or tired of doing something that's not necessarily fulfilling. I don't know what it is, but they know what it is because we've talked to a lot of them, and it's like their life doesn't have a lot of meaning. Their job isn't that satisfying. They'd like to do something like we're doing out in Montana. It's like, well, dude, come to Montana, or do what we're doing outside of Atlanta.
Right.
We'll help you do that. So we've got to get that group engaged, and they want to be engaged. There's people out there who really do believe in this climate change thing, but they don't know what to do. They're helpless, and the people I'm talking about are also people who are of financial means. Mm-hmm. People who, like I said, our country has got a lot of people who have got a lot of money. We've never had so much money, and they've got kids and they've got grandkids, and they recognize and believe that this global warming thing is a thing. But how can I help? I'm in Chicago. I'm in Dallas. What do I do? And I know Jeff Whaling and the National Hemp Association, and they're trying to develop something called the Replant, and working with Michael Wood and the Black Buffalo 3D company, and that there's tons of people trying to figure out how they can create an opportunity for more people to become engaged, and that'll happen. I think that will happen, And we're very supportive of those ideas.
Right. Yeah, I just talked to Jeff the other day, and it's the Replant Hemp Impact Fund. It's like a $500 million impact fund that's going to invest money in the hemp industry. And there was an article on marketwatch.com that actually mentioned IND Hemp. It opened up with, out in Montana, they're building this great big processing plant, and it's going to come online soon, and they're going to process this much stuff, and now we just need 524 more of these. It's like, how do we grow this thing? It's like, what do we do to reach those younger people? How do we reach the people with the money? It's like, maybe we need like a 1-800 number. Just call up and no, I don't know. I don't know what to do. It's frustrating. I keep using the word frustrating, Ken, and that's the theme here.
Yeah, what we're trying to do with IND Hemp out in Montana is trying to create something that is kind of a pilot program. Will it work in Montana? And we're kind of going through the learning curve, and it's a pretty tight and steep curve.
Yeah.
But as we learn and make changes, we're trying to create something here that we can then take to people and say, this is what we did in Montana. Why don't you guys do this in South Carolina or, in California or
Pennsylvania,
Ghana or Pennsylvania or the Ukraine
or Australia, everywhere. Yeah. All over the place. Yep.
Everywhere. Yep. Yep. And so if we can do that, if we can be successful and show people how we did it, we're happy to share with people, because it's like, if we really want to move the needle on climate change and provide opportunities for people and change the direction, the metrics of success is measured and how we look at profit in the future. And it's kind of all tied together. And that's what keeps us going every day.
Yeah. When I was out there with you in Montana, you took my family and me on a nice little float down the Missouri. That was great. Thank you for that. But we talked about I look at what I'm doing sort of like as a calling, right? Like I find myself with a certain skill set where I can talk to people and bring people together. I'm not a farmer, but this is what I can do. At least I feel like I'm doing some good in the world by making this podcast, by talking about hemp, by talking about regenerative ag and bringing people together. And you feel very similar in how you sort of have this calling, and you call it the hill to die on, right?
Absolutely. It's like, and I get a chance to talk with all our employees, and I get a chance to talk with other people, and there's so many people that go through life without that certain thing that is meaningful to them, right? What is it that you get up and you do that's meaningful? And I hope it's not your 8 to 5 job it's meaningful because it pays me a check so I can pay the rent and I can feed the family and I can go on a vacation. It's like, that's kind of shallow. And it's like, what is really important to you? And we call that our hill to die on. What is our call to battle, right? Mm-hmm. And it's this environmental thing. And for me and our family and people who work with us, it's like, how are we going to leave this world? Where's the world at today? And what are we going to do to improve on it? Because I do care about my kids and my grandchildren, but I care about your kids and your grandchildren. When Iris and Hazel were floating down the river with us, you look at them and says, man, it's going to be a tough world when those guys, in 30 years, unless we do something right now.
Yeah. So
if you do care, and there are tons of people who care, don't get me wrong, but it's like, what's that hill? What is that one thing that you're prepared to die on? And if you're prepared to die on it, then live like you mean it, and live with purpose and focus. And for us, it's the environment. It's how we're going to change the world. And I tell people, it's, my kids, my grandkids, great grandkids are going to know that we dug our heels in, and this is where we made our stand.
Yeah,
it's important to us.
Yeah,
and it'll be important to them. And I think there's a lot of people out there who are financially well off, who care about their grandchildren and their legacy. And so we ask those people, if you don't have a hill to fight on, and we're not asking you to die on any hill, Greg Necko, our marketing guy, he says, Ken, don't tell people they're going to die with you. So it's like, but come fight with us, right? This is a battle worth joining. And if you can put that on their hearts.
I mean, because it's about love, right? It's about love. It's not about really a fight, but it's you love this place, you love the people, and so I think what you're doing is, it's radical love for the planet.
Yeah, I mean, you'll sacrifice. Some of your friends think you're a nutcase, and that's there's a strong argument for that. But it's like, it's like, what are you gonna focus on? What's important, and then make it important and live like it's important. And there's a lot of people out there, and a lot of those people work with us, and a lot of people have heard the call to arms, and I think they want to do something. Just trying to figure out how we can get more folks engaged.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously I'm talking to a lot of hemp people, and I'm always trying to figure out how to get out of that hemp bubble. It's like you bring the hemp message to other industries, and sometimes they look at you like you're crazy, or like you said, you're just a tree hugging hippie or something like that. But that's not at all what this is about.
No,
this is about having a vision for the future that agriculture has to be a part of. Yeah.
You got the message.
Yeah, I got the message, and I think that we both got the message has brought us together, so we can, I do appreciate, your support for the show, and also, by getting to know you, I've gotten to know, it's sort of opened up the West for me. I've met a lot of people through my connections with IND Hemp, so it's pretty amazing where this silly little podcast has led me.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing. We love supporting you guys, because it's you're the voice for the folks out here who don't have a podcast. And we've got, Joy Beckerman and some of the other Morris Beagle. There's people out there who are, advocates, and we love those guys too. But anybody that'll speak to it every week, we're big fans, and we'll continue to support you.
But I think they're in the same sort of situation I am, where it's like they're just kind of preaching to the choir. It's like there's got to be some bridge to something larger, and maybe this the COP26, Glasgow summit, maybe that will lead more people to hemp and agriculture as a climate change mitigation solution. Because I've listened to a fair amount of media about COP26, and they talk about agriculture, but more in like, we have to, keep them from, they talk about the methane from beef farms and all that. But I really think they need to look at large scale production of, plants that will sequester large amounts of carbon. And we happen to know the right one, right?
Yeah. We've looked at the science behind hemp, and you've seen some of our crops, where the hemp grows 15, 20 feet tall in 100 days. Yeah. And, you harvest that, and, if you look at what's going on below the surface of the ground, and what it's doing to the soil, and how the carbon's being sequestered down there, and how you're building up the soil, and then you're harvesting it and taking it off, and you're creating something with it, right? That works. And like you said, if we can just do it over, let's say, 1 million acres, then it'll move the needle on things.
Right. And even 1 million acres wouldn't be a huge amount of crop compared to like acreage for corn and soy.
Yeah. I think last year we did about 90 million acres of corn in this country, and another 90 million acres of soybeans. And I think collectively around the world, we're looking at billions of acres. So, if you had 1 million acres of hemp, or maybe 100 million acres of hemp around the world, something that's providing you a food that would support you, and providing you a means of creating industry within small communities, I think that does a lot of good things. And I'm not saying we completely, remove corn and soybeans from the agriculture that we're familiar with, but let's integrate some hemp in there.
Yeah.
And I think that's only a good thing.
Yep. Yep. Oh, Ken Elliott, it's always good to talk to you. I appreciate your
Yeah.
time today.
Yeah, Eric, it's good. I look forward. I know you want to get more and more involved with the environmental end of things going forward, and I would encourage that. Anything we can do to encourage that. We need the hemp footprint needs to include those who are concerned about our environment and get them engaged with what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And people who are worried about global warming, come with us and we'll show you what we're doing and bring all the smart people that you're involved with and bring them to what we're doing, or encourage us to come to where you're at, because collectively it's going to be needed to get to where we all want to go.
Yeah, I think as far as this podcast goes, I'm going to expand the scope. So in the next year, in 2022, I'm going to branch out and talk more about regenerative ag and, entrepreneurs who are in various spaces, not just hemp, but I hope that will sort of bring more people to the conversation.
Yeah, no, more people is what we need. And if we can do our job and we can educate them as to what real issues are and help people identify a way that they can be part of the solution, I think that's a good thing to work on every day.
Yeah. All right. Awkward silences, I'll edit those out.
It is, yeah. But it's thoughtfulness, right? Let's think about that for a little bit. And it's like you say something, and it's like, how do you add to that, right?
Right.
Silence is not terrible.
It did not take us long to really mess this planet up, right? We had God's green earth, and then just in the past 200 years, we really just fouled it up. And it's going to be up to us and future generations to pull it back, or what's the alternative?
Absolutely. And like we started, we're a faith-based family, right? We're a bunch of Christians out in the middle of Montana, and we believe that this is God's creation, right? But I'd also think He uses us to get things back the way they should be, and we look forward to that.
How do we reach the I don't know, if we could get like the evangelical Christian community to be as passionate about climate as they are of some other hot button issues, that might, move the needle a bit.
Yeah. And, it's not a political thing, right?
Right.
It's not a right-wing Christian thing. It's not a left-wing radical thing. It's a thing that we all, this world we all live in,
Yeah.
We just got to change our messengers. The message is good. We just can't have people walking into a room of conservatives who have a bad image. And the media, our culture has got to stop pitting each other against each other, right?
Yeah.
So I think it starts there too. It's a very complex issue we're dealing with, and that's just part of it. Just part of it.
Yeah, that's what I like about Lancaster Farming newspaper, is that we're about farming, right? We don't get into much political stuff, but we keep it real, and we talk about soil, we talk about family, we talk about the men and women who are making this happen. Yeah,
and and you and I have talked about it. My daughter Morgan was born out in Redding, and so we love Lancaster.
Yeah.
And that part of the world, and it's we're just thankful to be part of what you got going on.
Yeah, well, I feel likewise. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Should we end it there? Should we keep going a little more, or how you doing on time?
I'm doing good. It's I mentioned to you that we're down here working with Jay Stetson. He's one of our hemp farmers, and Jay is part of the Stetson family that made the Stetson hats, and he's a great American name, and he wants to be part of whatever it is we're going to do to create a better opportunity for farmers and ranchers, for our environment. Jay's got kids and grandkids. He's he's from a legacy and he wants to continue that legacy. And
Sure.
so we're working with him down in the Bozeman area. So I got time, man.
You're pulling in lots of different characters into the IND story, right? You've got Stetson. You're working with the hemp protector people in Idaho, and you're building the supply chain, like a domestic hemp supply chain. What kind of products are going to be coming out of, being made from your raw materials?
You know what? One of your very first podcasts, and I can't remember the guy's name. He was over there at Thomas Jefferson University.
Ron Kander. Yep, Dr. Kander. Yeah.
Yeah. I listened to that and I thought, that dude is smart enough to take whatever I make and give it to him. He'll make stuff, right?
Yeah.
He will. And, he's just so many smart people out there just waiting for us to, make something, give it to them, and they'll create whatever they're going to create with. And, the analogy I always talk to people about is, hey, this crude oil that used to, bubble up from the ground was nothing more than a black mess until you had a refinery. Mm-hmm. And once you had a refinery, take a look at what we make out of that black crude mess, right? And so our hope is to let us get that, process that green hemp, run it through our facility or 100 other facilities just like ours, and then hand it off to the Ron Kanders and the folks out there, Maddie at Hemp Protector, the folks at Hempwood, we're talking with folks who are making car parts. And it's just the folks we've talked to about what they think they can make. It's like, dude, let me get you a bag of it and you show me how you do it. Bioplastics and biocomposites, and it's like, batteries. You've heard the long list of things, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, dude, let me get you a box of this stuff and you go to work. And while they're working on whatever they're doing, our job at IND Hemp is to find more farmers out there who will make the commitment and work with us and us to get our refining, our decortication process tweaked to the point where it's as efficient as we can make it. Mm-hmm. And then let's talk about making more of these things. So There's just so much opportunity out there, and there's so many, let's call them smart people who have got some great ideas. And I've got a lot of hope in the American way, because the American way is those kind of people saying, I can do something with that. It's like, dude, let me get you all you can handle then. So it's kind of neat what they come and talk to us about.
Yeah. And so, one time you were telling me about a group from Korea who came to you looking for hemp oil because of the omega content. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and this goes back to the conversation your mother, your grandmother tells you to eat fish oils, right? Why do I eat fish oils? It tastes terrible. But it's got to do with the omega-3s. And I take fish, I take hemp oil every day. I think it makes a difference. The omega-3s, if you just look at the science behind omega-3 and omega-6 and how all that relates, it's something you should be eating. I encourage my kids and grandkids, anybody I meet to do that. But in Korea, as in all the Asian countries who get their food from the ocean, and with the issues with the Fukushima power plant disaster and the release of radionuclides into their food base,
food supply,
they're very concerned about fishing and extracting from the oceans the food that they feed their children. So they're out there looking for good food sources, and they love hemp. They love our hemp hearts, the hemp oil with the omega-3. It's just a healthy alternative for them. And they're healthier folks. They're concerned about their health more so than we are. We all recognize the food we eat, and I'm as guilty as anybody. Probably not eating as healthy as we should be. And I think the Asian populations, those in Korea and in Japan, and I know the Chinese are interested, they're concerned about their diet, and they need to be. Yeah. We are so used to having cheap food here, right? It's good food, good cheap food. Our farmers and ranchers have done a lot of good things. They just don't have that options over in Asia. So omega-3 and hemp hearts and and the products that are coming. I mean, Chad Rosen with Victory Hemp. Chad has got some amazing things that he's doing, and we're big fans of Victory Hemp, and we hope he does more, because I think that's part of the solution. And so hemp-based food products, plant-based protein alternatives are also things I think that we're all going to see more and more in the future.
Right. And for livestock too, once that those legal hurdles get removed, that's going to crack the industry wide open. I
think so. What we found was when we were raising our grain was that we've got a high-end product that goes to food, and that's good. The oil is good, but we also have this co-product that would be ideal for an animal feed. And in Montana, they've approved it for feeding it to horses, and we have some locals that feed it to their cattle. They love it. It's just an amazing product. And I'm part of the Hemp Feed Coalition, and we're working with the federal government to try to get it approved into other animal feeds and livestock feed, and that's coming. It's a process. It's a bureaucratic mess that we have to get through, and quite honestly, we could use some help from our legislators or lawmakers. And I tell people that if this stuff is acceptable as a food for myself and my kids and my grandchildren, there ought to be a way to feed this to a pig. You know what I mean? It's like and so we're trying to get over that hurdle. They've got to check the box. It's from the FDA standpoint, it's like, this is how we go through the process of making it happen. So it's like, well, let's see if we can't do it a little quicker. Because,
And I think that a lot of that is like a fear of THC. Like they think there's going to be THC in the hemp hearts or something. Like, I mean, I don't understand really like what their opposition to it is. I mean, I know they have to cross all their T's and dot their I's and get all the testing done, but yeah, if you can feed it to your baby, why not feed it to your pigs?
Yeah. So and they recognize it. We have this discussion with them. They recognize it too. It's kind of the way the system is. We painted ourselves in the corner, and this is how we get out.
Yeah.
And it takes a long time. It's frustrating. I can tell you, our industry would certainly flourish if we could have those alternatives available to farmers and ranchers in Nebraska. If we could make a small grain processing facility in Nebraska or Kansas where they could make a product and feed, the high-end stuff goes into food, but you can take the lower co-products and feed it to your cattle and chickens and things like that.
Right.
That will sustain them as this industry grows. But it's like, that option is not available, and as a consequence, no one's doing this in Kansas and Nebraska, right?
Right. And Nebraska, it's like hemp grows so well there. It's like, sure, you're the corn huskers, but maybe you'll be the hemp huskers. I don't know.
Yeah, and Robert Burns over there, and with Nebraska's Crew Press, and he's dialed into all of that. He's got great processing equipment. It's just not politically right yet.
Yeah.
As soon as it gets politically and right, I think it happens.
Yeah.
And we have people like Robert out there who are ready to help. And it's just a timing thing. It'll happen.
Good. I appreciate your optimism.
Yeah. You got to be optimistic.
Yeah.
You got to be optimistic, don't you?
Yep. Otherwise, you just go crazy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So
there's always hope.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, Ken Elliott from IND Hemp, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for your time today. It's great catching up with you.
Eric, thank you. Just enjoy the heck out of working with you and the Lancaster Farming folks. Love being with you and Heather and Iris and Hazel when they're out here. Look forward to having you guys come back out here next summer with hopefully more of the same.
Yeah, we would love that.
Yeah, let's make it happen.
We're not going to take an RV this time. I think that was still a little much for my family, but we survived. But yeah, we would love to be out there in Montana again this coming year. Thank you.
Yeah, well, we look forward to it, and I'll keep listening every week, man. You guys do a great job.
Awesome, thanks. I appreciate that. All right, that's Ken Elliott, President and CEO of IND Hemp in Fort Benton, Montana. Thank you for spending the past hour with us. I know you've got a lot going on in your lives, and I do appreciate that you listen to our show. My name is Eric Herlock. I am the digital editor at Lancaster Farming newspaper, greatest agricultural newspaper in the world. Check us out online at lancasterfarming.com. All right, you can always get in touch with me, drop me a line, send an email to podcast@lancasterfarming.com. All right, and until next time, we will see you in the newspaper.
Industrial hemp.
Episode 169 of the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast is copyright 2021 by Lancaster Farming newspaper, which is part of the Steinman Communications family. Today's show was written and recorded, edited, and produced by Eric Herlock, and any music you hear throughout the show is courtesy of Tin Bird Shadow.